Yeah, we had a very good conversation with the Prime Minister last night, and we've come to a deal with Canada.
Minutes to midnight before Canada was set to be crushed by the new tariffs, we learn that a tentative deal was reached. So what is Canada actually conceding? What does it mean for the elbows up crowd and their mental health? And did we really avert a crisis? Plus, major concern regarding multiculturalism surfaces after a disgusting video showing a food plant worker doing the unthinkable emerges. And it has people scratching their heads. Why would he do that? My name is Ali Degno, and this is The Right Call. Like, share, subscribe, hype this video up. Any interaction on this channel helps push the truth out, and maybe someday help break that CBC-induced coma that so many Canadians are under. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, because if you're tired of that same old government and media BS, well, you found the right place.
Framework agreement was on his desk yesterday afternoon. Instead, Trump set a new deadline, giving American and Canadian negotiators 3 more days to get a final agreement. Mark Carney not going as far as Trump. His own late night statement says nothing about a tentative deal. He just says progress is being made, but more work needs to be done. Carney also says nothing about, take a look at this from Trump last night. We are talking about reviving the Keystone XL pipeline, oil moving from Alberta to the U.S. Yes, that is AI generated. What you're seeing did not actually happen. A pipeline erupting out of the ground in a cemetery, seemingly.
Before getting into the nitty-gritty of this trade deal, I have to admire the fact that the CBC has to tell its audience that this image right here is actually AI generated. like how low of an IQ is the average CBC viewer that the host, the anchor, has to let them know that no, this image right here is not actually Trump coming out of the ground with a pipeline in a cemetery. It kind of goes without saying. So I guess this is all you need to know about the average liberal voter, but
we're very happy with where we ended up. We worked together across agencies, the American government, the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Treasury, myself, the Chief of Staff, with the President, who had a number of phone calls with the Prime Minister. We're looking at documentation at this point. You know, I have responsibilities to brief Congress on what documents might look like, speaking with American stakeholders, businesses, unions, etc. We feel confident that we've reached an agreement that will not only continue to protect American workers, American jobs, American supply chains, but really strengthen the North American economy and create a situation where North America will continue to be an energy powerhouse, a manufacturing powerhouse, and align on important things like economic security and digital security. So while we certainly, I think, have eliminated some of the irritants that we've had over the past year, we also are taking a strong foot forward on the next steps.
So mere minutes before crushing 50% tariffs were set to go online against Canada, Donald Trump goes online and posts this. I have paused the 50% tariffs against Canada that were scheduled to kick in tomorrow morning for a 3-day period based on the fact that Canada and the US, subject to finalization of documents, have a deal. The great Keystone XL pipeline, long ago killed by sleepy Joe Biden, may be awoken from the grave. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We will touch on the XL Keystone pipeline in just 1 second, because the implications for Canada are actually excellent. And it's got me thinking, like, wow, it takes the President of the United States of America to help Canada unshackle itself with its energy sector. But first, let's hear what the president had to say about this news, and then we'll look into what concessions Canada is potentially looking to make.
And we've come to a deal with Canada. As you know, the 50% tariffs across the board were going on against Canada today. And they called yesterday and they gave us the points that we had to have. Very fair deal for both. The tariffs will be non-existent for our farmers. Our farmers were paying tremendous tariffs into Canada, and those tariffs are going to be totally eviscerated, down to zero.
Is the U.S. going to lower tariffs on Canadian autos or lumber?
We're doing certain things. We're got to give something, and we're doing certain things. We're paying a high number.
See, this is the one thing I appreciate, is that this is not just a unilateral direction. He understands that whenever you negotiate, you will have to give something back in consideration to your counterparty. So this might not be such a bad thing.
We're reducing it a little bit. It's good for everybody. But our farmers are going to be thrilled. Our manufacturers are going to be thrilled. And basically, we have no tariffs going into Canada anymore. Canada was charging us tremendous tariffs.
Ooh, I think he's talking about supply management. We'll take a little deeper look in that, but uh-oh.
We no longer have any tariffs. And what I was able to do is, we put, as you know, under the new tariff, I guess you'd call it the new tariff schedules that we came out with. They were going to get a 50% tariff on everything starting today, and we've held it back 3 days. It's all subject to finalization of documents. So subject to the finalization of documents, we have a deal with Canada, and I think it's a very good deal for both parties. It's great for our farmers. Our farmers will no longer be held up because they were being hurt very badly by Canada. Yeah.
So let's go through these concessions one by one here. The deal would include comprehensive market access for all American goods, economic security commitments, digital trade alignment, and many important provisions that will continue to protect our market and American workers along with our Canadian partners. So comprehensive access to all American goods. First thing that comes to mind is two things. We're talking about the dairy supply management and also the booze ban, alcohol back on the shelves. Brian Lilly writes in the Toronto Sun, without real movement on lowering auto tariffs, it was unlikely Ontario Premier Doug Ford would agree to end his province's ban on the sale of American alcohol. Ontario's Liquor Authority, the LCBO, is the biggest purchaser of beverage alcohol in the world and has had a ban on American products since March 2025. Now, this is the important part. Despite alcohol not being a major export to Canada, the banning of booze sales by every province except Alberta and Saskatchewan has been a major irritant for the Americans. And this is something that the US ambassador has told me directly. Alcohol is minute in the eyes of the US. It really isn't a make it or break it thing, but the message it sends, we're supposed to be partners, but we will forbid the sale of your products on our shelves was the problem. It's a messaging issue. It's an ideological issue. And I'm glad that it's finally going to go back up. Look, if Canadians want to boycott American products like alcohol, that's okay. I'm all for it because guess what? That's called freedom. Make your own decisions. Where I had a problem was the government should never step in and make that decision for the average Canadian because then that just becomes mandatory state-sponsored boycotting. And I'm not about that, especially not in a free market economy.
Let's talk about the power of the premiers right now. How much do they have, Kate? And what does this mean for perhaps another round of negotiations that the Prime Minister has to do with them, especially those who, I'm thinking of EB and Ford, who've really dug in their heels. They've said they're not going to return American alcohol to the store shelves. So how does the Prime Minister deal with the premiers right now when potentially their views, their positions could be standing in the way of a deal?
Well, I think it was Premier Eby who said American alcohol would be back on the shelves over his dead body. So obviously they know it's a pain point. And when you consider where the 338 tariffs were going to be applied, there's direct overlap with the provinces that have maintained that alcohol ban. So that was done very strategically. I would hope that the Prime Minister is engaging the premiers, particularly those that have enacted those bans, to make sure that they are on side with pulling them down. There are also provincial procurement rules, Marcia, around Buy Ontario, Buy BC, that the U.S. has taken an issue with, saying that it unfairly skews competition towards domestic business here, and they'd like to see those removed as well. I think a lot of the premiers expressed some frustration over maybe not being given the full detail and the full briefing back at the Council of the Federation meeting. And when we are in a federated model as we are, the premiers really do need to have, if not a seat at the negotiating table, very close contact with the Prime Minister if he's going to sign away some of the tactics that they have deployed in this trade dispute in order to try and secure a better agreement for Canada.
So it looks like Carney's got the 3 days now to convince the premiers to put alcohol back on the shelf because it is indeed a provincial prerogative. Now keep in mind, however, that Carney can put pressure on the premiers, and that's what boggles my mind that he hasn't done that since the ban was put in effect. Again, going back to my conversation with the US Ambassador, Pete Oakstra, he told me personally that when the entire trade war, if you want to call it that, began, he received several calls from governors of various states. And my favorite was a state bordering-ish Ontario. Let's go with that. And the governor said, hey, how about we send them back their trash? Because unbeknownst to me at the time, and this is a funny piece of information, but there's a specific state in the US that effectively receives all of Ontario's trash, at least Toronto's trash, and they're the ones who dispose of it, probably in an incinerator of sorts. So it would have been really funny for that governor to say, no more importing your trash, deal with it domestically, Ontario. But of course, the US ambassador said, no, the president has no desire to retaliate, no desire to escalate this. Stand down and let us take care of foreign diplomacy, as they should. Sadly, back home, the Prime Minister, Carney, did not do that with his premiers. He did not rein them in. And sure, they are autonomous. They don't have to listen to Carney, but Carney can put his foot down and say, look, you're going to let me deal with foreign diplomacy. Stay in your province and stop irritating the US. We're trying to get a deal, but that's not what happened. Now, point number 2, it's dairy, supply management. Well, this is going to really piss off the Liberal base because they have been dying to protect supply management. For those who don't know, Canada basically operates on a model that dictates how much each dairy producer can release into the market. If they produce too much, they dump their milk. No kidding, there's billions of liters of milk being dumped every year. What does this cause? Well, 2 things. For the consumer, you and I, we pay higher prices, much higher prices than if we allowed, 1, our own dairy producers to produce as much milk as they could, and 2, if we allowed the US to export its dairy to Canada. We would lower prices of milk, cream, cheese, butter, you name it. It would be great, especially for our food inflation. But in exchange, what it does is it creates a system that protects every dairy farmer and producer. It makes it predictable, manageable, and it offsets the highs and the lows of demand by the consumer. But that has been a trade irritant as well for the US. They want to have access to our market. And you know what? The consumer wins. Yes, it's going to put stress on our farmers. But here's the reality. Without stress, without market stress, there's no innovation, there's no incentive to improve the efficiency or the quality of your product. That's again why supply and demand exists, free market economics exist. Let the best win. Let the winner come out on top and stop subsidizing and protecting, well, the people who can't make it on their own. I know this is going to piss off a lot of Canadians by saying that, but again, unless we have a stimulus to push us to innovate and to grow better, we won't. And this is exactly why our telecom and our banking sector has been lagging behind the rest of the world, because they're oligopolies protected through regulations and the CRTC or, the banks of Canada preventing any competition coming from the US. Verizon wanted to come in Canada. We told them, the CRTC cut that. American banks have been wanting to come to Canada. We've been shutting them down. Meanwhile, we have Canadian banks operating in the US. So it's not a two-way street, I should say. It's a very unilateral street where Canada benefits, Canadian consumers are losing, and Americans, well, they have more choice. They're the winners. So after months of elbows up, Canada may be negotiating its way back towards concessions it once framed as unacceptable.
The relationship we had with the United States based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations is over.
We will get an even better deal because
well, should Canada make any more concessions to get to the table with the U.S., and how do you balance them?
we look the Canadian auto workers in the eye. We have $5 billion in the Strategic Response Fund.
10-15%, especially if it's baked in, especially if it's long-term, those companies will give up.
Through major investments that will help put Canada on the path to net zero.
The Liberal Party is very loyal to this issue of supply management.
We want no more concessions in the supply management system.
There is not a chance in hell that U.S. alcohol is going back on the shelf in British Columbia, and I'm proud of that.
The days of our military sending 70 cents of every dollar to the United States are over.
Canada's forest product sector remains competitive and resilient for generations to come.
Now it's a 50-50 revenue split, despite the Americans spending $0 on the bridge.
Was that a lie, and were you downplaying your concessions to Trump?
The federal government suddenly announcing it is now rescinding its tax targeting big tech companies.
Removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods specifically covered under CUSMA.
On the streaming decision, how should Canadians interpret that decision when Minister LeBlanc and Canadian officials are at an event yesterday co-sponsored?
Make America great again.
Yeah, the flip-flop will be studied in the future, I'm sure, by several political experts, because it's a perfect textbook example of how not to run a country. It's bad. Oh, and I forgot to mention the digital trade alignment. That one caught my attention. Does this mean C11 is going away? Does it mean the CRTC will stop having to mandate CanCon and effectively censoring algorithms? Does it mean that we will stop taxing American digital publishers? Does it mean that that just news, period, is going to come back on social media and it won't be banned anymore? Does it mean that C-22, the Lawful Access Act, will be rescinded because it disproportionately affects American tech companies that now supposedly have to spy on Canadians on behest of the Canadian government? Does it even mean C9 might have to, be watered down because it requires, once again, American tech companies to police such things? I don't know. I'm excited about it. I think the digital aspect of things is the best, but maybe I'm a little bit biased. But nonetheless, democratizing access to information online is paramount, because without it, well, we go back to CBC having to tell all of us that no, a pipeline being ripped from the ground by Donald Trump is not actually real, and it is AI generated. So now the real question becomes, what does Canada get in return?
Hovering, however, around $85 a barrel, which for the moment is too high. Dana?
And U.S. Trade Rep Jameson Greer discussing the kind of deal President Trump has been looking for last year.
Any kind of deal or arrangement with the Canadians, it's not just about Keystone or the pipelines, but those could be an important component. But I think that if the...
God, I would love to see Keystone XL revived. It would be so good for Canada and the US, for North America. Because to refresh your memory, it's a project that was proposed in 2008. Then after years of review and investments by the Alberta government, Obama rejected it in 2015, only to have Trump overturn it and approve it in 2017. The construction began. And then, well, Biden revoked the permit in 2021 after, again, billions of dollars were already invested and deployed, which is ludicrous. I don't know why he would. Now the project is canceled, doesn't exist, but why not revive it? It would create nearly 1 million barrels per day of extra capacity from Alberta's crude oil extraction all the way down to Nebraska, where it would then join with other existing pipeline to connect to refineries, some of them in the Gulf of America / Mexico, however you want to describe it, to then be exported. This is good for energy production, for investment, for construction, for oil prices, and to insulate ourselves from what's going on in the Middle East with Iran. We've seen what happens when you're not energy independent. Well, we could become it. But all of this information coming out about this trade deal, the pause on the tariffs, the potential concessions, they're all coming from the US. Where is our Prime Minister? Paging Carney, hello, where's the Prime Minister? And Kate Harrison said it best. Our Prime Minister campaigned on getting a better deal with the US. He's spent every single day since lowering expectations. Now, the only information we get on this signature commitment is coming from south of the border. If that feels like a loss, best to trust your gut. So you know that this deal, which for the record, I'm in favor for, will fly in the face of the elbows up liberals. Or else you know damn right that Carney would be doing the rounds of the media establishments. Or else you know damn right that Carney and the media establishment would be singing high and proud how good of a deal this is. And yet, radio silence. Well, somewhat, because this is all of what Carney announced today, congratulating Minister LeBlanc and Ambassador Greer for the significant progress in the Canada-US trade negotiations. He goes on to say absolutely nothing else of substance. Every detail has come from American counterparts. So why no victory lap? Well, probably because Trump manhandled the hell out of Carney. That's my take. But what irks me the most about this potential trade deal is the 400 days or so between promising it to Canadians and actually getting it done. Uncertainty is horrible for investments, and a former Wall Street banker would know that better than anyone else. So then, why did Carney wait until minutes to midnight to get this done? It's really too bad, because all of Canada was rooting for Carney and the Liberals to actually deliver a good deal with the US. Even Pierre Poilievre.
Conservatives have offered to help the Prime Minister since the very beginning. I've done it numerous times in our phone calls. When I went to the United States of America, I very clearly refused to criticize him on foreign soil. I briefed him on my visit and my meetings with governors and other American leaders. But our MPs have reached out again and again to the government to offer any help we can. Richard Bragdon here is the chair of the Canada-US Parliamentary Friendship Group. He's been continually offering his help. But Mr. Carney has refused to have any help from anybody.
And that's what's super important to take away from everything. Canada is simply avoiding new 50% tariffs. When you spend an entire year pandering instead of actually building your nation to be able to negotiate from a position of strength, hurting your citizens and the economy in the process.
I wish the Prime Minister made himself more available to Canadians than the Leader of the Opposition, because we may actually know a bit more about what's going on. I would expect Mr. Poilievre to focus on transparency and on wasted time. A lot of what we are discussing today, Marcia, was discussed back in October. It is very, very hard to believe that we enter this new potential deal or negotiation in a better position than we were last October. So again, what have Canadians given up in order to get a temporary stay of execution? And what does it mean for the long term? the Prime Minister should make himself available to answer that.
Well, it leads to things like that. Trump isn't done, no matter what the media will have you believe. And it was always obvious where this was heading from over a year ago. Hell, I was shouting it from the rooftops. But when it's liberals saying it...
We're not as big as the United States. We know that. And we have to be more strategic. We have to be smarter, and we have to have a hard look at ourselves and our own economy and what it is that we have to do here at home to make ourselves more competitive, so that in 20 years from now that we thank Donald Trump for having forced us to have a hard look at it. I know it sounds unusual to say that, and no one's feeling that way today.
No.
But, but we have to look at the longer term perspective on where our interests lie in all of this.
Oh, it's common sense. It's so insightful. Courageously saying it. But when conservatives say it, you're called a traitor. A Maple MAGA. I love that title, by the way. A grifter. What Jean Charest is saying is literally nearly word for word verbatim what me and all my contemporaries have been saying for over a year. Canada's problem was never that the US is too aggressive. It's that Canada spent years pretending that asymmetry didn't matter. The US is bigger, richer, more productive, more capital rich, and less exposed to Canada than Canada is to the US. So the answer was never to just shout slogans a little bit louder. It was always to invest more, to have more productivity, more energy, more infrastructure, more export options. Yes, I'm totally cool with signing trade deals with other nations when they're actually signed. We looked at it last episode. There's only been 2, but we've been gaslit into thinking there's 22. Because if Trump forces Canada to finally fix its structural weaknesses, then Charest may be right. 20 years from now, we may have hated the method, but we'll wake up and thank him for it. And in the meantime, if we have to default back to this media-approved flowchart, then so be it. Does Canada get a deal? Yes. Carney is a genius, thank God. No? Well, nothing Carney could have done. Now we're at the yes part, so Carney is a genius. And let's not forget the most important point. Poilievre is the true problem, is the real problem behind all this, so just vote liberals, boys. This is a paid advertisement for Rumble Wallet. They're sponsoring this portion of the show. What if your bank flat out told you no to your own money? Delayed transfers, frozen accounts, unexpected limits. It happens more than you think. That's exactly why crypto exists. It gives you control over your money, not partial control, but actual ownership. But most people never tried because it feels complicated. And I would know. I've been using crypto since 2014. I'm one of the early adopters, and I had to teach plenty of my friends and family how to use it, and there's always that little worry. That's where Rumble Wallet comes in. Yes, it's a wallet where you can store your crypto, but it does a lot more than just that. You can buy crypto in minutes, send it wherever you want, or cash out at any time. No waiting around wondering when your money will clear. And that's something I've also dealt with doing transfers, wires, you name it. It's never pleasant. It connects with MoonPay so that you can use your debit card, your credit card, or your bank account to get started fast. Inside the wallet, you can choose what you want. Bitcoin, dollar-backed stablecoin, or even better, digital gold backed by real gold. For a limited time, you can start your wallet with $10 in US stablecoin so that you can tip Rumble creators like myself by entering my personal promo code RightCall10 when you sign up right now. So scan the QR code or use the link in my description, download the Rumble wallet, and try it for yourself. And don't forget to use the code RightCall10 and claim your $10 in US backed stablecoin so that you can start tipping Rumble creators. For some of you, it might be the first crypto you ever own, and it's free. Once you use it, you'll finally see the difference between accessing your money and actually owning it. Restrictions apply. There is a limited number of entries available. Terms and conditions also apply, so see the description below or visit rumble.com/promo-official-rules for details. So away from the economy in this trade deal, but oh so close to my heart, we have a deep cultural clash happening in Canada. And it leads to things like this.
I've heard you guys are making a big fuss about us saying that I was sleeping with his feet on a table at a Tim Hortons.
For context, what he's referencing to is this picture of what appears to be a temporary foreign worker in Tim Hortons uniform, you know, the pride and joy of any TFW, sleeping on the job, at least appears on the job, with his bare feet on the table.
I'll give you guys one better to make a fuss about. I work inside a sugar mill. And I'm sure you guys love your sugar. And this sugar provides sugar to all of Canada. I work in the sugar mill, and every day I walked through the sugar one time with my feet naked, just to assert my dominance. Here you go. Talk about this one. This one's way worse. Let him live.
Ugh. Yeah, gross. And I guess I'm going to stick to honey now in my coffee. Life hack, honey and coffee, delicious. Not kidding. And now you have even more of a reason to do so, to avoid feed sugar from Pradeep. But that kind of behavior is not really shocking when you understand the history behind it. I learned this just yesterday, but there's a concept in India called Izzat.
Which brings me to the next adaptation, Izzat, which the West translates as honor, but in reality functions more like prestige or social power. Izzat, at its most basic, is how others see you, specifically how important you are. And the biggest marker of importance is that no one can make you do anything. Meanwhile, you were able to make others do them. In the West, we are honor-bound to keep our streets clean and not litter. But in India, that's a weakness. That's having low izzat, because you're being forced to do something that doesn't directly benefit you, and no one even has to pressure you into it. You just do it yourself because of how little izzat you have. This is why they don't have orderly lines in India. Standing patiently in line is low izzat behavior, when you can just push your way through. Jugad and Izzat worked as survival strategies against foreign occupiers. But now that India is sovereign, these same patterns are holding back the development of high-trust institutions.
And you thought I was joking, but his name is actually Pradeep. So any reasonable Canadian who's used to a high-trust society is rightfully scratching their heads at listening to a man claim that he walks barefoot in a food processing factory. What's the point? What does this accomplish? Isn't it a violation of food safety standards? And most importantly, why even brag about it publicly? But when you see it from the way they see it, through the lens of Izzat, that resisting rules and doing the opposite of what society expects actually is supposedly virtuous, well, then you understand why he's doing it. It also fundamentally explains why multiculturalism is a bad idea. No one in Canada cares where you come from. No one cares about the color of your skin or even the name that you carry. We just care that you come here, respect our rules, and become Canadian in your own right. But sadly, some cultures in the world are at odds with our own values. Therefore, it is our duty to protect our nation, our culture, and what we cherish the most, and to align our immigration policies accordingly. So if you've enjoyed this report and would like to get yourself involved with the channel, aside from liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, hyping this video, all the good stuff, which is so greatly appreciated, but you would like to take it a step further, and would like to contribute financially to the channel, I have a link in the description of this video towards PayPal for one-time donations. And if you rather do it on a recurring basis, I also have Patreon. It's $8 a month. Every donation helps me spend more time researching, finding the Pradeeps of this world, countering the CBC-induced coma that Canadians are under, and hopefully getting Canada back on track. So it is also greatly appreciated. If you haven't seen last video, click right here. We break down more stuff about the tariff, about the US, about what's going on down there. For the time being, though, my name is Elliot Daniel, and I'll see you next report.